Hello and welcome to the Tally Talk podcast. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Tally. We're a mental wellness startup specialising in anonymous group conversations called Tally Talks. Our weekly Tally Talks provide our members with a safe space to speak and listen in a discreet setting. This podcast will give listeners a feel for our weekly conversations while being anonymous. For this podcast, all participants have agreed to the recording while keeping their identity confidential. What you are about to listen to can be found sensitive and distressing. Please be advised to read the podcast description and respect the confidentiality and anonymity of the conversation. If you would like to attend a Tally Talk, please visit www.tallyapp.com and click Join a Tally Talk. Or if you would like to take part in the podcast, get in touch at hello@tallytalk.com. All links can be found in the bio. Thank you and enjoy.
Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm going to start it off. I'm going to say I'm intrigued. That's my feelings about this right now. Intrigued. Merlin, would you like to share yours?
I would say I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about.
And Eddie?
Optimistic.
Ooh, you guys. Okay. Bloke?
Curious.
And Obi?
So I'm excited. I want to hear what everyone has to say about their little breakups. Not little, but yeah, how they handled it.
Okay, well, on that note, let's kick things off. Welcome, everyone, to today's podcast. I'm so excited to be joined by some lovely gentlemen, and we're going to be talking about mental health and men's breakups, how they deal with them, how they process, and how it really affects them. Hopefully we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of that. So we've all seen the stereotypes of girls going through breakup. We normally hear about us eating a whole bunch of ice cream or chocolate and drinking wine, crying a whole lot, and processing pretty much every single aspect of that breakup from beginning to end and every aspect of the relationship. But it seems like when we think about men and breakups, they just kind of move on swiftly, like it almost never even happened. Is that really what happens though, guys? Let's start off by asking, how do you guys normally process your breakups? And I'm going to go to Eddie first.
Oh, good question. A lot of self-reflection. I'm quite introspective. Pretty much what I do on my day-to-day. So there's something meaningful to me. I'm kind of like, okay, what went wrong, and kind of analyze that situation. But I think there's not much you can do in terms of rectifying things. So the best thing to do is look inwards and then try to sort of improve yourself, and then hopefully just get out there. But there's a lot of pressure when it comes to that. So I'm definitely intrigued by everyone else's responses.
Merlin, how do you process your breakups?
To be honest, I haven't been in too many, but when they did happen, one of the most important things in my life is when I would break up would be that I have realized that you always want to leave the relationship still in good standing with the other person, because there's an energetic connection. There's a cord between you two on a level beyond this physical world that if you do not end that in a way that is conducive to a good life, if there's any type of resentment or any of these negative emotions that may have happened in the relationship and they aren't resolved, you will carry them for the rest of your life.
That's a very holistic approach to relationships in general from you, actually. I'm going to ask Bloke, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, sure. I've just been reflecting on what Merlin was saying, and also reflecting on my own relationships. And it's very interesting because although I've had maybe two, maybe 3 or 4 in my lifetime, and ones I would call serious, depending on the actual dynamics of their relationships, the breakups have been very, very different. Some of when I've been broken up with, and even that was probably the shortest one, that was extremely painful to me. But only on reflection did I realize that it was something around clinging to something and not wanting to sort of perhaps look at that. And also couldn't see the I was very much the victim in that space. So that healing, that process is very different to another breakup that I had, which we actually managed to navigate the breakup quite beautifully and ended separated with some grace. And of course, there was still tension at times and whatever, because we lived together and we had to speak about our resentment and our hurt and our pains and our frustrations, etc. But to be able to hold space for each other in that arena was quite refreshing, and it helped moving on to be quite easy. And of course, I've done the other thing as well in my younger years, where you just you go out and you party and you try to get back on the horse. But for me, in that space, looking back, there was an element of kind of maybe almost desperation. And it came from a need of not wanting to face your own stuff and not wanting to feel, not sit in that period of time where you just like, okay, I'm free now. And it's probably subconscious, because at the time you're thinking, sweet, I'm free. I can go here. I want to chat to this girl. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And the novelty soon wears off. And then at some point you're still left with those feelings that you need to process.
You've just brought up so many things there that we're going to have to come back to. The idea of the man actually being the victim in the situation, I definitely want to touch on that a bit later. And kind of that whole delayed, is it a younger days thing is it a young man's game to go out and party to get over it and then process? Let's come back to those things. Thank you, Blake. Obi, I'm going to go to you and then we're going to go a bit deeper into some of this, I think.
Okay, sure, lovely. Having listened to everyone speak, I think it's, especially what Blake said about his younger days. When I was a bit younger, honestly, I would, every third day, I'd be in bed with a different girl. And it was just me in my own space, trying to feel needed, almost to feel like I'm worthy enough for love, maybe, because I remember when I got into my breakup about 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago, I was really hurt, to be frank. And the mechanics of that relationship, or that breakup rather, was heavily against me. I was given a very strange ultimatum, which was more like, let's never stop talking again or become friends with benefits. So it was very hard on me just hearing that, and it's like, how am I meant to feel about that?
That was surprisingly insightful so quickly. So I think we're going to go a little bit deeper into that idea of breakups hurting a lot. And my first question to you all, and feel free to jump in if you have comments about what other people have said. I'm not going to always jump in for you and drag you into the conversation. You're more than free to hop in. So my first question to you all is going to be, when you are or having been the victim in the breakup, or feeling like the victim in the breakup, do you try your best to go through that alone, or do you feel free to seek out help? And is there help there for you in your surrounding areas, or is it something that men feel they need to go through alone?
For me, I feel like vulnerability is so powerful, and it's highly underrated. And one of the things, especially as a man, I notice that working with other men, that it's not easy, and it's not the first thing that comes out of their mouths. The whole concept of be a man, don't be a bitch, man up, big boys don't cry. That kind of conditioning at a very, very early age has an effect on a boy's psyche growing up. So you really do have to kind of train your nervous system a bit to be able to share that. And equally, that conditioning, as Obi said, is some women will almost, shame you for that if it's so ingrained on both sides, I think on the whole, men they'd rather try and hold it to themselves. Some of us have good friends or a good network who are able to then share.
Yeah, I just want to echo the whole vulnerability sort of aspect of sharing in terms of understanding, how to sort of navigate through that. If you were to get information online, it's a very dark space, I would exist, I think, in terms of what information you can get there.
It's so funny you should talk about that, Eddie, because I've done a podcast before with Bloke, and he works in men's health, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember him talking about the need for safe spaces for men and men's groups being something that's really key to that. But I don't think the concept of a men's group is often made readily available. Is that something, Bloke, that you see men talking about frequently in your men's groups without exposing anybody too much?
Oh yeah, definitely, massively. I think most of the thing is around relating. For the main part, is relating is a massive part. And again, you can openly share and notice, and even if you're witnessing somebody sharing their pain or their heartbreak, you can feel that in yourself and voice that as well. So it's to have that type of support in and around, either a trusted coach or a group of men that are there primarily just for your well-being. I'm such a champion for that type of work. I think there's more and more coming out now, but there still needs to be more. There's a lot of women's groups out there, but not so much on the men's front. But it's a massive resource to be fully supported and held by a group of brothers that are there to, just want you to be the best version of yourself.
I think that's definitely something that people need to champion more. You're right. Men's groups and things like that to help men have a safer space to talk about their mental health. Merlin, I'd be quite interested to hear your views and opinions of this, because you've shared some quite holistic ideas already.
Certainly, absolutely. I work with a lot of men. I do a lot of relationships coaching, and I see there's the old stigma, the old behaviors, the old paradigms that we used to live in, from our parents or grandparents' generations. Men were, how do I say it, the alpha part of the relationship. They were the breadwinners bringing, the money home. And there was like this dualistic viewpoint in a relationship. And those times are greatly changing. And the shifting energy on the planet right now is people are waking up to that there is a masculine and a feminine inside of us all. So when we go through these breakups and things like that, sometimes it's a blow to a man's ego, because a man doesn't even notice that's what's really going on. And through a lot of coaching that I do with men, they actually come to realize that it's not so much that they even loved, like that word love, or it hasn't much to do about the relationship. It's that their ego can't let the fact go that this person that they've been with wants to end it, and they didn't choose the path.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When I was saying one of my relationships, one of the most painful ones, was also one of the shortest, and I knew intuitively that actually that had less to do about the person and more to do about my own ego refusing to, like, hang on, this wasn't in the script. What's going on? And it was so dramatic. And now I'm so grateful for that experience, because it put me on a path of learning a lot more about myself. And I can actually look back and be grateful for that person and that experience, so that I can learn more about myself. Like, oh God, yeah, that was me. I did mess that up. I am like this. I was a bit controlling, and it was just, I was insecure. I was a bit needy in that situation. And there was a lot I wasn't taking responsibility for at that point in time. Over time, I realized, having to sit in that in that deep pain was brought to light for me. And so again, every single situation, I know every single one of my relationships have been very different, but you look at using those, as Merlin said, as a tool to sort of your own self-discovery, and you unearth yourself, a bit more, and uncover some more about yourself. And they are very much the mirror that Merlin was talking about. Yeah, absolutely. I went through a period of my time where I had probably like 5 women ready to marry me at the same time, and I was a total, trapped in that ego, that primal way of like living life in relationships. And, I've been married for over 10 years. And I'd say the first 5 of those, there was infidelity all through it. I came out of the military. I served in the United States Marines, and I was a complete mess. So I used relationships to mask my own issues. And like I said, I had probably 5 women that I could ask to marry me at any time. But the funny thing is I was already married. So
I went through a spiritual awakening now about a 2-year period of time where I went through a period of time of seeing myself. And I learned so much about why I lived like that and why I was. And I broke through all these relationship barriers that I had with my partner now. And all the truth came out for about 7 years of just total lies and everything. And now we have the greatest relationship ever. And I just live a very transparent life, and there's nothing in my life to hide. So that ego awakening, we're able to put the ego in our pocket instead of having it run our life. Sometimes it takes breakups or relationships to really bring that out for us to see ourselves. In my case, anyway.
Merlin, I'm going to have to ask, how did you avoid a breakup doing that? Because that's quite, from a woman's perspective who has been through a divorce, that's quite traumatic.
Well, what happened is so I had about, like I said, I lived a life just, I traveled a lot in the military. I just was in a very dark place from a lot of traumas I experienced, and I just kept piling different experiences with women on top of them. So what happened is I drank the plant medicine ayahuasca. I don't know if any of you have ever heard it, and it broke me. Like it allowed me to see myself for the first time in my life. And then I told my wife that, okay, we have to break up, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And then what happened is I flew to Brazil and I met this beautiful woman over there, and I almost married her, and I just repeated the same thing all over again. And then I found a shaman that I worked with for 3 years. I followed him around the country drinking ayahuasca, and it showed me that I'm not supposed to leave my wife. I'm supposed to heal everything that I have done up to that point. And she started drinking the medicine with me. We went through a period of healing, and it took me 2 years for me to tell her all the lies that I told her for 7 to 10 years of our life. And slowly everything came out, and she actually healed and forgave even some of the girls that I had relationships with. She's friends with. They're actually very good friends of ours. And there's no negative energy there. There's nothing. In fact, I can even hang out with them without her being there. She wouldn't even think twice about it. We went through a very deep layers of healing in this relationship. This is why I understand a lot of the different dynamics of relationships and affairs and cheating and infidelity and all these things. So it's totally possible. It's 100% possible. It's just a choice. It's not that it was right or wrong. It's just a choice. And if somebody chooses to be together, there's no reason why you can't work on it. You just have to understand the consequences of all the actions involved. And it just takes a greater level of awareness. So it was quite a journey. It was definitely a journey. And life really threw me some hard lessons, but it was a beautiful, beautiful thing to come out of. So my partner, I call her ride or die. She chose to stay with me instead of leave me. And we had to go through this huge wall of crap to heal and continue pushing into that. And we broke out of it. It was about a 3-year process of a lot of work. So.
Well, I just commend both of you for being that vulnerable, because I think it takes a lot of trust and vulnerability to get through something like that, which obviously I could not go through. So well done to the two of you. And on that note, I understand the woman's perspective of being hurt, being cheated on, but what about when the tables are turned? How do you process that?
I haven't been really cheated on, but I've had a type of relationship where I felt worse off. But I was in a dark spot. Every second thought, I would just get extremely angry. I wouldn't, of course, go Hulk or anything, but I'd be really upset out of nowhere. My mood would spoil. So, yeah, these situations, they do have a really negative effect on people.
I feel like you're saying we just do it and make it look better. Because we just do it and it's just a full-blown ugly cry with the snot.
It's something, with everybody it's different, but I feel sometimes there's this facade that men handle it in a way where we just get through it. But I feel like if there were genuine feelings from a guy in that relationship, then yeah, definitely there will be tears. Not necessarily tears, but there would be a lot of hurt. You would feel the impact. Even my dad, whenever he was heartbroken, he'd drink a lot. So yeah, and my dad's like an old school, old fashioned African man, agbada everywhere, So yeah, like these things do happen.
Do you think it's fair? Do you guys think it's fair that society seems to have the expectation that men need to continually look as though they're fine and maintain this macho image, even when they're going through something as awful as a breakup?
It's kind of a hard one to answer because I'm so far away from caring what the expectations of the world are. I'm at the point now where if the world has an expectation, I know that that's something that actually probably I shouldn't look to fulfill, because we're not at a place where the collective consciousness is best suiting the unity, the advancement of humanity in general, because these expectations are built on just decades and decades of just very dense way of living and breathing and having relationships and loving. And in order to break through them, it's time to let go of these expectations and just do what we have to do to have a good life and be happy and let ourselves feel.
When do you know, what's the sign to you that the response should be, mate, it's not okay, you're not okay, rather than blowing it off?
I'm thinking about my immediate friends network, and we're quite close and intuitive. So there's a state of being that they are kind of normally operate at. So I'd be aware if that was over a prolonged period of time, that was something was off. So we're quite good now, even though we've been, typical guys and whatever, but we are quite good now. It's like, no, seriously, you good? You all right? Or what, do you want to talk? So I would often volunteer space for that or time for that. And sometimes we've done that together as well. There's been one guy in particular I'm thinking of. There were two of us actually went round and said, look, sat him down. It was almost like an intervention. It's like, dude, this what you're doing right now, because he decided to sort of numb his pain through alcohol and drugs and whatnot. And he just it was getting a bit out of hand. Or we thought that at least. So we kind of jumped in and said, whatever it is you're going through, you need to speak. You can speak to us or you can speak to anyone else. And we just want to let you know that we're here for you, and just pick the phone up, And again, it's interesting because it's not always, it was met with as it was meant to be received. But and this is only recently, funny enough. And as I'm speaking, I thought, actually, he hasn't called or whatever. So I've had to check in with him and still do that, and he did say he was going to go and see someone and, see a professional. But I think we all know, we're all aware of the kind of this, the suicide rates and everything else. One of being the biggest killers in men. So for us and me personally in my network, we've lost a guy to suicide as well. So I think maybe we're more sensitive to it. But it is if you feel it or if you see it, then you're better off just asking the question, because he won't sit well with you if you don't. And that's what it was. It was just it was nagging at me, and a friend of mine said, "Yeah, me too." So okay, cool. Let's go and meet him for a coffee. But I think guys know. You know, don't you? You know if someone's not themselves.
I, as a woman, I don't even wait to see if they're okay. I mean, if I typed right now to one of my girlfriends, "We broke up," if I was in a relationship, right. Like five women would be calling my phone at the same time. Like they don't even wait to see if I'm okay. Mm-hmm. It's just such a different response. I think yours is it's a more thought through response, while ours is like an automatic reaction.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's it. Yeah, but you may say, "Oh, you want to talk?" But that would be it. But we might be thinking you're okay, and you want to monitor the situation or assess the guy. But again, we will offer an ear if we find that's really important. But I think that it's asking for them. On my side, I'm thinking about just my guys in particular, or even for me, I need to know that I actually want to talk at that time, rather than I'm quite insular as an individual. But I think, actually, I need to speak. I want to speak now, or I want to say something. So it might not be, even if I share that information, I've broke up with her, then that doesn't necessarily mean I want a phone call or to even discuss it there and then.
Oh, I didn't want to talk about my last one either. I had no choice. In fact, I didn't talk. I sat and cried, and they were like, we didn't like him for this reason, and this reason. I'm like, girls, when I was with him, you loved him. He was the best person in the world. You had 50 million reasons you didn't like him anyway. Just waited. So it's definitely what I'm learning from this is that clearly the stereotype, preconceived ideas of what it is that men do when they break up are wrong. Maybe there are guys that do it. Maybe there is a space for the partying and the moving on. But really and truly, the hurt process and all of that, it still happens the same way. It's just so much slower and more calculated in how it seems to be done. It's kind of nice. It's kind of nice. Maybe if I ever have to go through a breakup again, I'll try that way. I'm going to ask you something a little bit more serious, guys. Well, I view it as serious as a woman, which is when I see a friend in what I would say is maybe a domestic abuse or emotional abuse situation, and how to step in. Do I intervene? Those questions all happen. And, you know, do I say anything? Have you ever seen men in those situations where you've been like, mate, you have to break up with this woman. It is not safe for you. And how do you approach that as a guy?
I think the psychological aspect of how you convey kind of your care for the situation to the person. If you tell someone, you know, you have to break up with them, or you can't live like this, you know, psychologically there are processes in the mind that are going to want to go against, because they're not in a place of receiving. So it's very important that you speak to them in the place that they're at. So if they're in a place of unreceiving, then the only thing that we really can do for them is provide them support and to let them know that you're just simply there and that they can speak if you want to hear them. But when they're in a place of receiving and they ask for your support, then it's possible to go in there and possibly give them some advice or suggestion. Otherwise, you could push them back into the other paradigm, which is the pain that they're experiencing.
Do you think that men often struggle to see that they're in a situation like that more than women do? Because I know that men also suffer from domestic violence situations, but it's so much less common to hear of it reported. Do you think that they take longer or struggle to recognize that they themselves could be in an abusive situation, whether it's verbal or physical?
I think the greatest power for men and women is the ability to walk away when something isn't right. That comes with relationships, friendships, business, whatever the case is. And it's just an understanding of your self-worth. And so normally we kind of pick up the signs early on. And that's when you have to identify if that's right for you. But sometimes, you know, you do get lost in that relationship, and that can happen. And that's when you do find it difficult to sort of pull out, like Marlon said. Always kind of keep that in mind with everything that I do. And it's a difficult one as well, because I don't think men want to sort of look like the punishment is happening to them in that regard. So I can definitely understand the whole sort of glass on the floor and walking on that. But that's why it's so important to surround yourself with a network of good people to always remind you your self-worth as well.
Do you know what? I think I'm going to throw that question out to all of you, because I think it is an important one to really delve into when it comes to men and breakups, is that like you can also experience it and go through such negative aspects of relationships like domestic abuse or verbal emotional abuse, whatever it is. And how do we support our men through that? How do we support our brothers through that? And how do we even recognize that as a man in that situation? Bloke, would you like to talk to us about that a bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I wouldn't want to make comparisons between the man and the woman, but bearing in mind, I think the elements are still the same. There can be some sort of, denial. Maybe it's something that you can put that onto yourself. It's definitely, normally it comes when you enter these types of, there is a huge self-worth element to it. Like Merlin said as well, it's being able to have that network is key. From the outside looking in, it's really difficult to want to step in. And again, there can be a lot of shame wrapped around that as well, because, those types of things. I'm the man, I'm the leader. I don't take any abuse, whether it be physical or emotional or verbal from anybody. And to admit that can be quite challenging, but likewise it is for women too, I'm sure. So I'm not sure if the dynamics are any different between the men and the women in this instance, because the rate of emotions and the fallout and the processes will be exactly the same. I have a friend that had this challenge, and at the time I didn't even know. I didn't know. I'd been with her for 6 years, and it was only the last year, and it was slowly and slowly. I didn't. All of a sudden, he was just like kept turning things down, and not really wanting to go anywhere. And I feel so, and then I kind of we had the conversation. So, and they just had a child, and he's like, I need to leave. It's too much, and yeah. So it was a long process, and I would consider him one of my closest friends, and yet he never shared that at all. He kept that very, very secret.
I think, coming from a woman's perspective who's been in a domestic abuse situation, I feel like as a woman, all of the emotional aspects of it are the same. Like, it's the shame, it's everything that you've just said. But I feel like being a woman, when I talk about it, it doesn't shock people in the same way as it shocks men. It shocks someone when they hear a man say it. And even me, being a woman, if I hear a man say that, I'm almost taken back, whereas I'm not when I hear a woman say it. No matter how well I knew the couple, and no matter how surprising it is, I'm like, well, it could always happen. But when I hear a man say it, there's almost a sense of disbelief that shouldn't be there. And I think that's what makes it so difficult, from my opinion, for men to reach out, because I don't know if they really feel like they're going to be respected the same afterwards, seen as a man still, or even sometimes believed. Am I wrong in that assumption, guys?
I think there is an element of truth in that, which is probably why it took so long for him to, I'm thinking about a friend in particular, but I think that's probably why it took so long for him to say anything. That, and he was I remember him saying he thought he was himself, and even afterwards, because of the breakup took a while, and it was quite hostile. He was like, "Am I this? Am I that?" Doubting yourself. Do I act like that? Do I speak too much? Am I just am I aggressive? Always questioning himself. So he felt safe to do that at the time. But I think the reason why that didn't end earlier, or he didn't speak about it earlier, was because of those very things. There'd be a doubt around his own, manhood, so to speak, for one of another word.
Yeah, I've been where he was. I kind of relate so intensely to that. But at the same time, I get it. And I think that is the issue. Like, maybe for men experiencing that, it's do I walk away, and how do I walk away and keep my manhood intact? Obi, do you have anything to share on it?
I think when it comes to the man being the receiver of the abuse, it is like when you said you were kind of taken aback. In a sense, I think I've never had a friend who's been hit, but I've heard of people, uncles, and hit by their wives and everything. Nobody believes them. They call them the boys who cried wolf or whatever. Like, why are you lying? What's wrong with you? When it's finally time for you to tell the truth, no one will believe you because you're telling such a rubbish lie. Why would a woman hit you? And even me, like back then when I was younger, I was like, wow, like I remember I was like 15 then. I was like, wow, this dude's weak. How's his wife beating him? Like, aren't you a man? Like, I've grown a lot and I understand these things now. So it's just, I think as a people, we just need to almost like grow up, and then I've also learned that human beings have these inbuilt biases, And I looked at the wife too. She was extremely tiny. She was like 5'3", husband was like 6'4". And I was like, how does this add up? Like, how's your story adding up, So Yeah. And I think for a man as well, if you're in that situation, I think you need to do the same thing we advise women to do, to speak up and to get out of it, because you are much, much, much more worthy of being treated as a punching bag, at the end of the day. That's just those are my thoughts on the situation.
And on that note, I'm going to draw this podcast to an end. I just want to say thank you guys so much. Thank you for your vulnerability in it, your openness in it all. Thank you for sharing all of the things that you have done, and thank you for your insight above all else. I am going to close with any last minute health tips from you guys and a checkout word if you can. So I'm going to recommend a book called When to Walk Away by Gary Thomas. And the reason I'm going to recommend it is because I'm currently reading it, and it's about recognizing toxic people in your life and learning to walk away, which is a journey I'm on at this point in time. And my checkout word is going to be wiser, because I feel a little bit wiser after hearing what you've all said today. Eddie, your tip and checkout word, please.
Yeah, for me, with breakups, it's a part of the learning experience in life, especially if something that was meaningful to you ends. It's not the end of your life. So keep growing, keep doing the things that make you happy, work on yourself, the inner work and out work, and wait for that opportunity to come if something new happens. It could be a new job, it could be a new lover, it could be a new friendship, but all that happens when you put the work in and you surround yourself with good people. And I guess my checkout word would be growth.
Some fantastic stuff there. And Obi?
I think my tip, it's just a bad day, not a bad life. So sometimes when you go through a hard breakup, you honestly just feel like rubbish. And you start to always remember the bad things. But there's a lot of light in life, So allow your light to illuminate the somewhat infinite darkness you're in. So my checkout word would be light.
Thank you, Obi. And last but not least, Bloke, would you please close us out for this session?
Yeah, I would love to share a tip that I've worked with myself for processing at the end of a relationship, and that is one that's called a feminine cleanse. And what that means is that you don't take any nourishment from the feminine for a minimum of 6 months. So that's no flirting, anything like that. Anything where you feel like you can get nourishment from the feminine, that's off limits for a minimum of 6 months. And what that does then is reconnects you with the feminine essence within yourself, and then the ultimate feminine being Mother Earth. And it's one of those things that I can't tell you what you'll get from it. All I know is it's extremely powerful practice. You just follow that discipline for 6 months. And my checkout word would be empowerment.
That is the best closing comments that I think I've heard in a while. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a fantastic evening.
Thank you for listening to the Tally Talk podcast. Remember to subscribe to our channel and be the first to access our weekly episodes. If you would like to leave us a comment, then please email at hello@tallytalk.com. We would love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. For all other inquiries, please visit www.tallyapp.com. Thank you and see you next time.